All right, so this is the beginning of our Biafra series. So before we get into the coups, the famine, the crimes, the assassinations of generals on both sides and stuff like that, we need to get into the pretext of Nigeria. So Nigeria in 1960 was carved into these three regions: the East region, the West region, and the Northern region. Who decided to do that? The Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II. That's who was mainly in control of Nigeria, and that's what they did. So by 1963, as the English protectorate decided to allow more Nigerian officials to take place in Nigeria, we now have the Midwest region. Now, this is the beginning of, I guess you can say, the pretext of what would soon become the Big Biafra War. Once 1963 turned and the Midwest region was voted in to separate themselves from the West region, there was a major concern with the Igbos and Igbo Nation. The reason why that concern was so major is because of this right here. Based on the Igbos and their connection with the Midwest region, because these two regions were very ethnically connected. Even though all of Nigeria, we share ethnic connection. At this time in 1963, these two regions were very much a part of each other. Thus, this region voted to separate from the West region. Now, why that happened, there are a lot of reasons, and we'll cover that in another video, but it happened, okay? According to history, it happened in 1963. They voted to separate from the West region. The issue, though, is that that made a lot of people afraid. It made a lot of people afraid because the Midwest and East regions were very, very rich in natural resources like oil, timber, rubber, cement, and coal, along with palm vegetation, education, schools and training, and agricultural exports. So before we go into the idea of like war and guns and bombs, the motivation to attack and destroy the Igbos had to come from the fear of what we would do with controlling all these natural resources. So how do we know these natural resources were very important to the world? Well, because in 1965, the automobile industry, the oil industry, the rubber industry, the cement industry, the coal industry, the agricultural industry, the timber industry, the transportation industry, and the mining of nickel, iron, and copper were the biggest major economic industries in 1965. These are all things that Igbo land had a deep connection to and a whole lot of natural resources in, meaning big money, deep pockets, Igbo ego, okay? Ego Igbo. Okay, big money. Biafra was about to hit billion-dollar buzz down. Big francs, baby. Big pounds, baby. It was big time to get the money. Now, with a nation like Biafra budding and people being afraid of what they might do with the wealth, there came a sincere fear of Biafra having control of almost the entire country of Nigeria. So this is why other nations decided to try and squash Biafra. So this is part one. You need to know who would be motivated to even want Biafra to go away if we're generating a lot of money. And I don't want to show you how much money Biafra was already making, or better yet, how much the Eastern region was making before we called it Biafra. But let me just say, it was a lot of money at a time where a lot of money was more money than you could dream of. That's all I'm going to say. So this is part one. You need to understand something. Biafra was an economic powerhouse. There was a lot of natural resources coming out of Igbo land that were becoming more and more important the closer we get to 1965. So let's look at this map one more time. 1960, Nigeria is cut up into three regions. 1963, the Midwest region votes itself to separate from the West region. And with these two regions being so connected, they were combining their economic forces to generate wealth. Wealth that would soon become some of the greatest foundations of natural resources that you could use at the times. Because where do we not need oil? Where do we not need timber, rubber, cement, and coal? So let's think about life right now. To make an automobile, you need oil, you need metal. To have homes, you need wood. Okay? To give a car tires, you need rubber. And what are the streets made out of? So let's think about why Igbo land was so serious to creating civilization in the future. It's because in Biafra, there was this much major economic booming happening, and they had to put a stop to it. They had to put a stop to it, or else the Igbos would not only have all the money and the natural resources, what would stop them from overtaking all the elections as well? Because if they're making all this money and they're building this kind of civilization, they will have all the economic power. They didn't want these two regions to get together and wield their economic power. Now, this is the thing you have to think about. Could this be a reason to break them up and go to war? Could fear of what they might do with their money and not wanting the Igbos to dominate cause them to destroy Igbo land? If you knew that the East region and the Midwest region were going to come together and create a superpower, would you stop it? Because that is the basis of Biafra. Biafra was basically happening to stop the East region of Nigeria from becoming a superpower alongside with the Midwest region. So by 1963, this happened. By 1965, these things were the major economic industries. Makes you wonder, when did Biafra War start? 1967. So there you have it. 1960 were 3 regions. 1963 were now 4 regions. These 2 regions down here just so happen to have all the natural resources that are going to be the most necessary in the future. And by the time 1965 rolls around, these 2 regions are set to become the richest pieces of Nigeria. And somebody didn't like it. I'm not going to point fingers at who. I'm not going to point fingers at where and when. We're going to save that for another video. But all my Igbos out there have to remember, why did Biafra even happen in the first place? It happened because people were afraid that Igbo land was going to become a major superpower in Nigeria. That's why that happened. And it had to be stopped according to some of the enemies. Why that happened? Hey, bruh, haters gonna hate. But it's good to know the truth because it heals you as to what was going on in Nigeria at the time in the 60s. Well, I'm going to tell you, the Igbos was busting shit down. That's what was happening in the 60s. Igbos was building a great economic engine. And if Igbos were going to do that, some people did not want that to happen. That's all. So this is part 1. You need to understand this. You need to understand the timing. Understand the timing. The Igbos were set to be a huge help in all these industries. And if they can do all this on their own, they don't need partnerships. And this is why I said before, a Igbo can make peanut butter and jelly without even a peanut. We are very dominant. We are very self-sufficient. We are very creative. And everybody's got to gang up on the Igbos to stop them. Now you understand the introduction to why the Biafra War would even happen in the first place. Jealousy.